Welcome to This Week in MMA, brought to you by Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levi, and we've made it to episode 6. I want to thank you all so much for your support. No time to waste. Let's get right down to business. Former PFL heavyweight and light heavyweight champion Vadim Nemkov is now a free agent. The only reason I say former champ, not because he lost it in competition, but because, as you all know, Bellator has disbanded, and now Vadim, I think it's time we get this guy into the UFC. I know he's got some history with Yuri Prochazka from back in the day, but Vadim actually stated that, man, I'm sick of cutting to 205. I feel comfortable at heavyweight. I can be one of these lighter, faster guys at heavyweight, which you guys have been seeing coming up, you know, guys like Tom Aspinall. Now, when I say Aspinall, there's one kind of little thing that maybe, you know, that might not be true, and that's the lighter, smaller guy. Okay, Aspinall's not a lighter, smaller guy, but Aspinall moves like a middleweight. He's got that speed. That speed truly kills. And with a guy like Nemkov, you saw the size difference between him and Tim Johnson the other night, and the way he handled him. And you know, I posted on Twitter. I said, you know, like, you know how Dana White does, like in Contender Series when someone wins. I was like, hey, Vadim Nemkov, get your ass over here, kid. You're in the UFC.
Congratulations. Get over here. You're in the UFC.
And someone actually responded and was like, he just beat a truck driver. Hey, guys, Tim Johnson has a win over Marcin Tybura, who is currently a ranked heavyweight. Tim Johnson arguably beat Volkov. Like, cab driver my ass, dude. Like, show some respect. And plus, if you're just basing Vadim Nemkov's success off one fight, why don't you zoom out and look at the track record, because it speaks for itself. And this guy clearly deserves his UFC opportunity. So let me know in the comments who y'all would like to see Vadim Nemkov fight in his UFC debut. And it seems like it's going to be at heavyweight. So, I mean, just pulling up the rankings, there are lots of options. There's the winner or loser of the Sergey Pavlovich versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight. I still kind of want to see him go to 205 and run back that Yuri fight, but if he's staying at heavyweight, I think he's going to do well. Hey, I'll tell you a fight I want to see. Here's the fight. What about Vadim Nemkov versus Jailton Almeida? So far, no one's been able to stop the ground attack of Jailton. You can say Blades, but Blades got bodied that first round. You know, a little stunt by Jailton, but I'm saying, like, Jailton's taken down every single person he's fought. One does not simply take down Vadim Nemkov. Book it. Like, kid, you're a free agent now. You're no longer in the co-leader. Come home, Vadim. Come home, kid. So also on the PFL card was an extravagant 5-round lightweight title showdown between Usman Nurmagomedov and Paul Hughes. Now, personally, I scored it a draw. I'll tell you why. I had rounds 1, 3, and 4 for Usman Nurmagomedov, the champ, and I had rounds 2 and 5 for Paul Hughes. Then you factor in the point deduction. That's a 47-47 draw. Now, a lot of people feel like Hughes got robbed. If we're scoring on Pride rules, and when I say Pride, I'm referring to Pride FC. I know it's 2025, and I gotta preface that, but no, but in all seriousness, you know, if you're basing it off damage, I mean, Paul Hughes was murdering that body. He was destroying that body. There was a little bit of a break and a separation, which a lot of people feel let Usman get the chance to recover, but I will never discredit Usman Nurmagomedov, man. Like, to just go out there and get your arm raised against a guy like Paul Hughes, that's a big deal, let alone all the other guys you've beaten. This guy's still undefeated. Like, I know they're going to unfortunately run it back in PFL. I say unfortunately. It's not unfortunate. The unfortunate part is that they're not going to run it in the UFC. I want to see these guys run it in the UFC, man. Let the best of the best fight in the best of the best. So, yeah, I want to see Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov run it back for the title. I mean, like, what else are you going to do? They don't have that many options. And who y'all got if they run it back? And who did you score the first fight for? Like I said, I had it 47-47, a draw. So good friend of the show, Big Marcel, one of the most trusted sources in breaking fight announcements, just announced that Gilbert Burns will be taking on Michael Morales in Miami, April 12th. at UFC 314. And this is a hell of a matchup because Gilbert Burns, at this point in his career, he's a gatekeeper to the top 10. If you're not ready for the top 10 or the top 5, Gilbert Burns isn't just going to beat you, he's going to expose you. But then on the other side with this kid, Michael Morales, he has stood out since day one. I remember when he was on Contender Series, and he had a very tough fight with Nikolai Veretetnikov. If y'all don't remember him, he's the guy that recently went to a hard-fought split decision with Danny Barlow. And Dana said, if this is what you look like now at 23, I can't wait to see what you look like at 27. And the funny thing about it is Michael Morales is still only 25 years old, and the leaps he's making, he's already in the top 15. He's already running through guys, and now he's getting this massive opportunity. Like I said, if you ain't quite ready for Gilbert Burns, he might dangle off your neck. He might one-hit quit you. He might give Khamzat Chimaev the toughest fight of his career. Like, don't sleep on Gilbert. Even in fights he loses, he dropped Usman. Like, Gilbert's a tough out, but Michael Morales has some physical attributes that, you know, I don't want to call him cheat codes. I mean, it's not like he juiced up or something. The guy was just born insanely gifted, but it's one thing to be born insanely gifted. Look at Robelis to Spain. We'll get into him in a second. It's another thing to be a super hard worker. And Michael Morales, he's not just a physical freak. The guy's got the technique and the well-rounded skill set, and I expect him to be a moderately sized favorite here against Gilbert Durinho Burns. At UFC 311, UFC bantamweight champion Merab Dvalishvili handed Umar Nurmagomedov his first ever defeat in the fight of the night. Now, before we talk about that, did y'all think that was the fight of the night, or did y'all think Yuri versus Hill was the fight of the night? That being said, Merab's tenacity, his willingness to dig deep. Another cool thing that Merab did was he surpassed the great Georges St-Pierre for the most takedowns landed in UFC history. Merab hit 7 takedowns on the night against Umar Nurmagomedov, which one does not simply do. Passed GSP's all-time record for takedowns in the UFC, and now Merab is at the lead with 92. Catch him if you can. So the always unique and entertaining Yuri Prohaska recently went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I highly recommend y'all check it out. You already know that this dude is different, but hearing him talk with Joe, I mean, just again, anytime I hear Yuri talk, I love how thoughtful the guy is. Like, you'll notice, like, when anyone asks him a question, he like really takes a sec to just pause, to really internalize and take in what your question was, and then he gives you a very thoughtful response. I respect that about him. Now, one thing that he revealed to Joe, because a lot of people were wondering, like, why did Yuri weigh in at like 203? Like, this is a big light heavyweight. And apparently this dude sat in the sauna for way too long, got himself down to 200 pounds, and he didn't want to show any of the fighters. So he was like out in the corner, like chugging water just to get his weight back up a little bit. And what's wild about it too is that, like, when he rehydrated, the rehydration weights came out, and he was only up at like 208 on fight day. Jamal was upwards of like 220 something. So yeah, the talks of Yuri potentially being able to move the middleweight, I mean, I can see it, man. I can totally see it. Like, dude, if you're weighing in at 203 and fighting at 208, like these other light heavyweights, man, they're coming in 225 and whatnot. So, but that being said, who am I to tell Yuri any differently when you're having the results you're having? You're a former champ in the weight class. You're a top 3 guy in the weight class. The only person that's beat you is the current champ. And you consistently put on the kind of fights that the fans want to see. So yeah, no criticisms here. It's just kind of interesting how that works, man. But hey, skills pay the bills, baby. So one of my favorite fighters outside the UFC, and a guy that I consider to be one of the most dangerous knockout artists in MMA flyweight history, Tyson Nam, at the ripe age of 41 years old. My boy Tyson Nam is out here sleeping fools. He made his karate combat debut this past weekend. Check out what he did to his opponent.
Who's fighting right hand. Oh! Tyson Nam lands the big right.
Just the Hendo follow-up. He had me at the Hendo follow-up, and man, I always take great pride, and it's a pleasure to watch Tyson Nam sleeping fools from back in the day when he knocked out the Bellator champion Eduardo Dantas to this past weekend knocking out fools in karate combat, you know, throwing H-bombs at the end. Like, hey man, Tyson Nam, keep doing your thing. He's an ageless wonder, man, and Yeah, I hope he keeps fighting because I'm a big fan. And Tyson Nam, I think I may even had an interview with him on the show, maybe like, guys, got to be approaching 5-8 years. Let's get Tyson Nam back. Let's get Tyson Nam back. You fight like that, that's the kind of guy I want to talk to. So let's get him back. And speaking of which, I may have an interview line with one of the brightest prospects in the UFC bantamweight division named Malcolm Wellmaker this Friday. So make sure y'all tap into that. Now, speaking of karate combat, another man who's found great success in this promotion is Robelis Despain. Now, Robelis Despain comes into the UFC and he gets an insane knockout in the first 20 seconds of his fight against this kid, Josh Parisian, right? And then he goes back out there in the next two fights. I think his opponents were like, all right, yeah, I'm not going to stand with this 6'7" Taekwondo Olympian. Let me take him to the ground. And it worked like a charm. 2 fights in a row. The UFC were like, yeah, maybe this guy isn't the next Francis Ngannou. Best of luck in your future endeavors, kid. But but listen, he found a new home. He gets into karate combat, and the way he's been treating these guys now that, there's no ground game involved. I know in karate combat, you can go on the ground for like 10 seconds, but I'm saying you can't lay on someone an entire round. You can't submit. You can't do all these things, right? So check out his debut knockout on Karate Combat.
The black pants do not blink. Oh, over. Right round, see, same body movement. This is faster than 18 seconds. Wow.
Like sheesh. Like they have to find him a little better step up in competition than that. Now check out his most recent knockout, which just happened the other day.
The DeLorean DMC token. Well, I'll get to DeLorean in a minute. The DMC freestyle is live now. Robelis Despain looking for a quick start. Marcus bringing out tumbled and he drops. And the referee is waving this one off.
And it's honestly like more of the same. It's honestly like more of the same. Like these guys are broken by his presence before the fact, and they go out there, get clipped, try to get back up and recover, get clipped some more. And that's all she wrote. So I don't know if they have titles in karate combat. Someone fill me in on that, but I'd love to see Robelis Despain fight for that karate combat heavyweight title, man. But what would be really cool is if we could get like kind of a merger between kind of some of these bare knuckle guys with the karate combat guys. And what I mean by that is, how dope would Ben Rothwell versus Robelis Despain be? And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I feel like both these organizations are kind of limited in the heavyweights that they have, but if they can combine the two together, just saying, tell me Robelis Despain versus Ben Rothwell would not be a pretty quick knockout on either side. So UFC 311 wrapped up, and there's a lot of takeaways. Here are a few of mine. In the main event, Islam Makhachev, I mean, he just ran through his short notice opponent, Renato Moicano, like it was nothing. And like, it's one thing to beat a guy, as a minus 1,500 favorite, but one does not simply submit Renato Moicano in the first round, let alone with a Darce, let alone with that specific Darce. Islam wasn't even connected to the bicep. He was connected to his wrist. Like the the force he must generate with that Darce that he has. And this is the second time in a row he's done it. Hit it on Poirier. Just hit it on Moicano. I still want to see that Arman fight be ran back. I know the fans aren't exactly thrilled with, and the UFC too, with, someone pulling out of a title fight, a fight of that magnitude the day before. It sucks, but I don't think the kid's scared. I don't think the kid was looking to run, man. I mean, we're talking about a guy who fought Islam Makhachev at 22 years old. Arman was like 22 years old, maybe even 21, and short notice in Russia in a co-main event. So why would he be scared to go fight for his dream, which is to be champion? I think this guy is so confident that he feels like, hey, man, I'm injured right now, but I truly am the number one contender. Let me go prove it again. I'll go fight Charles a second time, this time for 5 rounds. I win that. Give me my title shot back. Because it's like the only other fight I'd want to see Islam in right now. You guys know what it is. The Topuria fight, the super fight, Topuria versus Makhachev. But if you're not going to do Topuria versus Makhachev, then the only fight I want to see is Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Now, if somehow Arman and Charles run it back and Charles gets the upset, then okay, Charles, you earned your rematch. But Charles already pulled out of the rematch once, already lost to Arman once. Let's see if they run it back, because Dana said Arman might need one more, but talk is cheap. You never know, like, depending who Arman's manager is, he might be like, listen, man, show him some medical stuff that his back really was having issues. I don't know. But bottom line, it's either Arman fights Charles, winner gets title shot, and or Ilia Topuria moves up after the Volk fight and fights Islam. So bottom line, very exciting times in both the featherweight and the lightweight divisions in the UFC. And which fight would y'all prefer to see next? Now, we talked about Merab Dvalishvili going out there against Umar, and it must feel so good for him. Just, the fact that he felt like he got pressured into this fight. He felt like he truly didn't get to do his championship victory tour and have that parade and really get to celebrate and, take 6 months with the belt. Like, it's like, hey, kid, quick turnaround. Now you're fighting the toughest guy in the division, an undefeated Nurmagomedov. Kind of I don't know if I want to call it a meme, but a picture came out and it had Usman Nurmagomedov, Habib Nurmagomedov, and Umar Nurmagomedov all in the same picture. I don't remember what the exact record was, but it was something like 65 in Merab. You know what I'm saying? Like 65 in one, the one being Merab, right? So, man, Merab, he just beats champion after champion after champion. Now top contenders. It's like he does exactly what you want champs to do. So I'm excited for his next challenge. Should it be an O'Malley rematch, a Peter Yan rematch? I think Umar needs to win another fight or two before we talk about that. But I'm open to whatever makes the most sense. So what do y'all think makes the most sense at bantamweight? Honestly, what I think makes the most sense is, hey, Merab, go take a 6-month vacation, kid. You just fought Sean O'Malley and dethroned him, and then handed Umar Nurmagomedov his first ever professional defeat back to back in the span of a few months. Go enjoy your belt, kid. I don't want to see Merab until, third, fourth quarter 2025. But knowing this madman, he's probably going to come back next month, right? But yeah, shout out Merab. Like, how long are people going to keep doubting you for? Now, Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill was my fight of the night at UFC 311. I thought it was an incredible back and forth fight where I was on the edge of my seat, and Yuri clearly made some big improvements. I love the head movement. I love the pull counters and the speed in there. Like, he looked really good. And the thing about Jamal that really was bothersome for me in this fight, and that's not to at all discredit Yuri. Yuri did his thing. Yuri was on point. Jamal, if you would have told me before the fact that Jamal was going to be in there with 2 knee braces, I would have had a different opinion going into the fight, because, see, that's the thing about the fight game. One day you're in top form, breaking output records in your division. The next day you're coming out here. Well, it's not the next day. A ruptured Achilles injury, an MCL injury, and now you're out here with 2 knee braces, and it broke my heart. And it's like, even with 2 knee braces, it was still 1-1 going into that third round, and Yuri made the requisite adjustments to go out there and defeat the former champion Jamal Hill. So, wow, what a fight it was. I think that for Yuri, get right back in there against another top contender. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to a title shot. Like, even like, let's say Ankalaev beats Poatan. Would y'all be opposed to Ankalaev versus Yuri? I wouldn't. And then as far as Jamal is concerned, I'd like Jamal to not come back until he's 100% healed. He had the ruptured Achilles, which is an injury that people don't often come back the same from. I mean, you see it in multiple sports, and he tried to make a quick recovery and a quick turnaround against Poatan, didn't go his way, and comes back, not quite a full year later, maybe, what was it, 8 months later? I don't know. But he came back, 3 quarters later, and I just think he didn't take the right amount of time to heal. Like again, when you see a fighter with 2 ankle braces or 2 knee braces, right away there's an injury. And even with that injury, I thought he fought admirably, but it was simply Yuri's night. So give Yuri the credit he deserves. I hope he makes a quick turnaround. And for Jamal, I do not want to see Jamal Hill fight again until he's fully physically healed. Now, Jailton Almeida and Sergey Spivak, these two just went after it, and that was the best striking I've seen from Jailton his entire career. This guy was throwing straight punches, going for it, setting up his jab. I was like, okay, Jailton. Both overcame bad spots, but eventually Jailton like I said, I think there's a lot of options for Jailton Almeida. Vadim Nemkov in his UFC debut. Just saying. Just saying. Or do y'all want to let Vadim Nemkov knock out Curtis Blades real quick? Tell me what y'all think. Now, Rainier de Ritter, obviously, y'all know how happy I was about that because I've been publicly talking about how I'm on a fade Kevin Holland world tour. And yeah, I've not been secretive about that whatsoever. I said one takedown and the fight will be over shortly after. Guess what happened? I think it was actually 2 takedowns and the fight was over shortly after. But yeah, it seems like Kevin Holland's been acting in a way which people don't find very pleasant. And I think the people closest to him might need to have a bit of a talk with him because you went from being one of the most promising. I don't want to say I don't want to say promising prospects in the sense that people had like title hopes for him because Kevin always made it clear that he's more of like a Donald Cerrone than like a championship type guy. He doesn't want to fight in championship fights because of the media obligations. Translation: I don't want to fight in championship fights because I'm not good enough. Hey, don't worry, Kevin. I'm not good enough either. So I ain't judging, bro. But yeah, I definitely feel that Kevin needs a little bit of humility, needs to chill out a little bit. And because I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad fighter. I think he's very talented. And actually, when you hear him talk from time to time, depending what his attitude's like, he does seem like a cool guy. He does seem like a fun guy, but like right now, he's just gotta drop the narcissism and the insane arrogance that he's been displaying, especially towards a legend like Rampage on his show. But this goes way further than the Rampage thing. The Rampage thing may have exposed Holland to a lot of people, but if you go back to any of my old podcasts breaking down Holland fights, I guess since the Darren Stewart fight, I've been saying this for years. But not that I hope Kevin Holland starts taking things seriously because that's not his thing. What I do hope for Kevin Holland is that just calm down a little bit. Just treat people with respect. No more 45-70 talk against legends of the sport, man. Just chill a little bit, man. And you think a dude that's a stoner like that would be chill all the time, but it seems like Kevin's on edge. So I don't know. But I truly do wish Kevin the best because Kevin at his best is one of the most entertaining fighters in the sport to watch. So I hope he takes some time off too. Just from man to man, I hope he takes some time off. But betting man, I hope he fights every week because the Fade Kevin Holland World Tour rolls on. Now, how about that upset between Raoni Barcelos and Peyton Talbot, man? I did not expect that at all. I think a few years ago I would have picked Raoni in that spot, but I felt like Raoni was on a steep decline, might still be, but you have to be well-rounded in the UFC. You can't be in the top 15 of a weight class like bantamweight with no ground game. And I say no ground game. That's fake news. If Peyton Talbot had no ground game, someone with the jiu-jitsu credentials and Brazilian national team wrestling credentials that Raoni has would have finished Peyton Talbot. So you would have submitted him if Peyton really had zero ground game. But this is what we call the vet legend. Can't wait to see his next one. And Raoni, shout out to you, man. I hope they give you some kind of legends fight. Sucks you missed out on that Rafael Assunção fight, but maybe Cruz or Font. I'd be happy to see you get one of those. But either way, man, shout out Raoni. I've always been a big fan, always will be a big fan. And when you see a guy at that age setting back the hottest prospect in the division, according to a lot of people, it's impressive. So just a couple more I wanted to touch on was firstly Grant Dawson against Carlos Diego Ferreira. One doesn't simply win the grappling exchanges against Carlos Diego, especially when Carlos Diego is fresh. I feel like in Grant Dawson's last 2 fights, he has truly turned a corner. In that fight against Rafa Garcia, the violence from top position, from mount. Just Grant, none of us have an issue with the fact that you're a grappler. A lot of us had issues with, we kind of felt like your approach was a bit of a lay and pray style, kind of boring. Well, you've been the farthest thing from boring your last 2 fights, the destruction of Rafa Garcia. And then that last fight with Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's a 3rd-degree black belt. We're talking about the kind of black belt that went out there and beat Gary Tonin in pure grappling. And not only did Grant Dawson dominate the grappling exchanges, but his stand-up, I love seeing the progression. Now, Eileen Perez defeated Carl Hosa. Guys, I told y'all, On that card, that 311 card, my most unprofitable fighter to bet on is Carl Hosa. Anytime I bet on Carl Hosa, she loses for the most part, you know. So I picked Eileen Perez there. Actually, I was barely watching that fight. I had some friends over. We were talking. We got into like a big time debate about some other stuff going on in the world when that fight was happening. So, but I saw the result and it was like, yeah, when you bet on Carl Hosa at chalk, expect to get burnt. She's got all the talent, all the output, all the volume, all the technique, but doesn't have that just like that oomph, that just extra little something that will separate her and take her to that next level. So it's unfortunate because Carl is good, but shout out Eileen. You wanted it more, and as a result, you won. Shout out Muin Gafurov going out there as the second biggest underdog on the card, right behind Raoni Barcelos, and handing Rinya Nakamura his first loss. Rinya will be back, but Muin simply too advanced at this point in his career. And lastly, I thought Tagir Ulanbekov and Clayton Carpenter had a great fight. Clayton Carpenter taking such a massive step up in competition. I think he's got a bright future. And Tagir, man, I think that he's top 5 like potential, but the issue I have with Tagir is he's so massive for 25s that you can't fight that often because those weight cuts are just brutal. So if he can figure that out or even move up to 35s, I think he'll be fine there. But I know he wants that Pantoja fight. So I want to see Pantoja fight Manel Cap, assuming Manel Cap beats Royval. Like that's a big if. You got to get past Royval first. But if he gets past Royval, I'd like to see Cap get the title shot. But I wouldn't mind seeing Alexandre Pantoja and Tagir. I think Tagir's a tough matchup for everyone in the division. So yeah, 311 was a great show. 311 is a great band. And you know what's interesting, that my casual friends came over to my house, not for UFC 300, not for UFC 303, but they came for UFC 311. So shout out 311. You know what I'm saying? One of my all-time favorite bands. Make sure y'all check out their new album, Full Bloom, available everywhere. So Darren Till, after he absolutely embarrassed Tommy Fury at that press conference to the point where Tommy Fury pulled out the fight because he said he was scared of Darren Till throwing head kicks in a boxing match. It's like, he really does have the IQ of a loaf of bread. He really is an empty head, like, because you saw Darren Till in that boxing match against Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor, schooling him in pure boxing. It was easy, and it was good to see Darren Till get back on track, get that big finish, school the guy throughout the process. And when I say the process, I don't just mean the fight. I mean before the fight too. There was a little side-by-side interview. He's like, mate, you're literal shit or something like that. My boy Meticulous is about to play the clip right here. But
I'm not excited for this fight with you because you're shit. I'm just going to beat you. You're just shit. Like, I'm sorry to be disrespectful, but you're really, really shit. You fall over your feet. You wing punches. Like, I don't actually think you realize what you're getting into with me.
But yeah, I'm really happy for Till. I just find Till super entertaining. And yeah, I wish he would have rounded out the game, you know, the skill set on the mat so he could stay in the UFC. But fuck it, man. Now there's other opportunities outside the UFC for guys to put on classic fights, memorable fights. And I think that he could potentially have a future in one of those organizations. Brother of UFC featherweight champion Ilia Topuria, Alex Topuria, is making his UFC debut at UFC 312 against Colby Thickness. Now, originally, Cody Haddon was supposed to take the fight. He pulled out. So they called up Mr. Colby Thickness. Now, real quick, before we talk about this last name, little storyline, Topuria. Guess who he's the brother of? Topuria. Mr. Thickness. Guess who Mr. Thickness is the sparring partner of? Volkanovski. So you got a little Topuria, Volkanovski, little heat. You know, those two camps are facing each other again. But with Colby Thickness making his UFC debut, I only got one question for the fans. Are you down with the Thickness? So Jeremy Stevens, ever since he left the UFC, I know the PFL results were kind of mixed, but when he transitioned to the bare knuckle boxing, he's been doing his thing, man. He's been doing his thing. He went to a draw with Jose Aldo, and I believe that was pure boxing, not bare knuckle. But he just went out there against the Underground King and made him not answer the bell between rounds. For those that don't know who the Underground King is, I'm talking about Eddie Alvarez, the former Bellator champion, the former UFC champion, the former, was it Sengoku or Dream champion? One of y'all old school fans, let me know. I think he might have even been the former Elite XC champion too. Like, yo, Eddie Alvarez, the Underground King, bona fide legend of the sport. And Jeremy Stephens, listen, Jeremy Stephens got his fair share of finishes too. I know y'all remember what Jeremy Stephens did to RTA, what Jeremy Stephens did to Josh Emmett, and now Jeremy Stephens adding the great Eddie Alvarez to his highlight reel. And afterwards, he called out Conor McGregor. He called him Cocaine Conor. They had a little face-off. Check it out.
Who the fuck is this, baby? Yes. Yeah, let's make a date. Let's set a date. Who's going to stop me man to man? No one's going to stop me. David, make the date. Let's do it. I'm down for the pro, yeah? I'm down for the pro. Let's go. Let's fucking do it. Hey, bleed, baby.
So, and then after the fact, Mr. Feldman, the president for BKFC, was saying that Conor was going around the venue telling everyone, I'm going to fight Stephens, but in bare knuckle. Like, he went out of his way to let people know that. Now, I don't know how that works with the contracts in the UFC. Best of luck, kid. But hell yeah, I want to see the fight. You know, who the fuck is that guy? Like, this fight's been a long time in the making. So I don't care if they're in their 40s or not. And Conor McGregor's got a raging cocaine problem. I want to see it. And like I referenced earlier, Ben Rothwell also had an insane knockout at bare knuckle. I mean, hit him with the first punch, laid him out. Dude, how can we go about making Robelas de Spain versus Ben Rothwell, whether it's a cross promotion, whether it's bringing one guy into the other league, whatever the case may be? I have to see that fight, guys. So former UFC middleweight champion Sean Strickland recently came out and tried to make a pact with Dricus du Plessis. Hey, no takedowns, real men stand and bang. This is what Sean Strickland said to Dricus.
Listen, Dutchman, I'm going to need you to be a man. I'm going to need you to stand up, not go to your knees, and we're going to need to strike like men. I know you like to wrestle and you like to choke people out and do some dude, but I'll make a pact with you. You make a pact with me that we stand up like men and we settle this like men.
Dricus simply responded, I'm not here to make pacts. I'm here to win fights. And a fun quote, an old school quote by John Bones Jones before he fought Ryan Bader, right? They were both undefeated prospects at the time, and the winner was going to go on to fight Shogun for the belt. And in the pre-fight buildup, you know, Ryan Bader kept talking about how, yeah, Jones has all these flashy moves and all these things. And John Jones said, I don't know if y'all are familiar with John Jones' trash talk or his mental warfare, but it's literally some of the best I've ever heard in my life. But John Jones was like, there's a famous quote, you can hear a man's thoughts through his words. Ryan Bader talking about my flashy moves, that's what he's worried about. And that's exactly what I'm going to give him. And the reason I bring up that quote is because, you know, Strickland saying he doesn't want any takedowns. That's what he's afraid of. That's what he's worried about. And that's exactly what Dricus is going to give him. Now, one of my favorite prospects in the middleweight division coming off Dana White's Contender Series last season is Mansour Abdul Malik. I think this guy is a force of nature. Now, he was originally supposed to fight Antonio Tricoli. Tricoli pulled out. In comes Nick Klein, not Nick Hine, Nick Klein. I know we've talked about Mr. Hine, Sergeant Hine before, because when Nick Hine fought Drew Dober, and he actually beat Drew Dober by unanimous decision, but Dober went to Nick Hine, excuse me. Dober went to Nick Hine's after party, and then he ends up marrying Nick Hine's sister. Now, they got divorced later, but I'm just saying, like, hey, if you're going to beat my ass, I'm going to go marry your sister. Well, the reason I bring that up, only because Nick Klein, who's fighting Mansour, has a similar sounding name to Nick Hine. But so Nick Klein, on his Contender Series fight, I made a mistake and I picked against him. I thought I showed him a lot of respect, but apparently he didn't think so. He was one of the few fighters from that season of Contender Series. Actually came back to my video, left me a comment, like, you know, talking a little shit about the prediction. Hey, you know, I love it. I love the back and forth. I love the fact that you were petty enough to come back to me. But now you got to fight Mansour Abdul Malik. And I look forward to you coming back to my video prediction after the fight too. And last but not least, Marvin Vettori recently accepted a fight with a man named Roman. Now, according to Marvin, he thought he was fighting Roman Kopylov. Well, it turns out that Marvin Vettori is actually rematching Roman Dolidze from their very controversial fight that went down a few years ago. A lot of people thought Dolidze should have got the nod, but that's neither here nor there. Now they're going to run it back. I know Dolidze has been wanting this for a while, and Marvin's at a point in his career where he doesn't really have a say in you know, who he fights next and whatnot. Yeah, we're offering you this, you better take it, kid. And Marvin, always been historically durable. He's got that blockhead. And Dolidze, unorthodox, funky, will go for all kinds of weird submission attempts. Like, look at that Jack Hermanson fight. So, yeah, actually, I look forward to seeing them run it back. No two fights are ever the same. I'm curious who's going to come out here with more aggression, who's going to look fresher. So, I think the UFC did a good job rebooking this fight between Dolidze and Vettori. And last but not least, this weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the UFC returns. Israel Adesanya taking on Nasruddin Imavov. Title implications on the line for Imavov, getting back on track on the line for Israel Adesanya. And the whole card is stacked, man. I mean, we got MVP Michael Venom Page versus Shara Bullet at 185 pounds. You got one of my top prospects, Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira, coming off the knockout of the year in 2024, taking on the always dangerous, the always exciting Saeed Nurmagomedov, one of the fastest spinning attacks in the entire sport, plus nasty ninja chokes. That's going to be one to remember. And then we also got Ziam versus Mike Davis, Myra Bueno Silva versus Jasmine Jastovicius, which I believe is the first ever women's UFC fight in Saudi Arabia. So it's cool to see the world progressing. And I very much look forward to this card, and I'm going to break it down sooner than you think. So I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to check out This Week in MMA episode 6. I truly appreciate it. Make sure you all smash that like button, hit the subscribe, leave me some feedback, some comments. If you want to share, I appreciate that too. Subscribe, of course. I know I said that, but I'll say it again. And I'm truly, truly grateful for everyone that shows me support, that's had my back. You know, I'm down to interact with any of y'all. You can subscribe to Half the Battle everywhere podcasts are found. I'm on Twitter at Best Fight Picks. I'm on Instagram at Half the Battle Pod, and on TikTok at Half the Battle Podcast. So follow me at any of those spots. I'm always down to interact with anyone that has my back and shows respect. And until the next time,